Welcome to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack. So today I want to talk about the story of Winston Churchill's catastrophe at Gallipoli. Now, the reason why I want to cover this is I don't have any nuanced takes on it. I'm just going to tell you the story on it. So if you know the entire story, you might not even want to bother watching this episode. But the reason why I'm doing it is because I'm preparing to make an episode in the villain series on Winston Churchill. In order to do that, this is the last episode that I need to make to refer to. So we're talking about his terrible disaster in World War I as head of the Admiralty of Britain. And we've already made a sub-episode on Winston Churchill about the cabal who was funding him. I'll put a link in the description of that below, but that's going to be linked in the actual villain Winston Churchill episode. So basically, the story goes, none of the matters of World War I matter except for the matters related to this specific thing. So 1914, the war starts. It's going to go till 1918, right? In 1914, it already drags to a stalemate. There's a 500-mile long, trench system. It's just stalemated, right, in France. And basically, they come up with this idea, basically they're looking for any idea that would break the stalemate, And so basically, they're going to make this goal is to open up a second front, right? So I'm just going to basically read you the story out of history.com article that's referenced below. And just know in the story, because this is a story about incompetence of leadership, right? And this is the part that's important and that's going to be related to the villain Winston Churchill series. So listen to the parts where it says, and Churchill decided to press on anyways into disaster, because this whole thing is just going to become a catastrophe, okay? So remember, this is the beginning of the war too. It's very early in the war. The young minister, who's Winston Churchill, proposed a bold stroke that would win the war. Abandoning his earlier plan to invade Germany from the Baltic Sea to the north, he now championed another proposal under consideration by the military to strike more than 1,000 miles to the east. He proposed to thread his naval fleet through the needle of the Dardanelles, the narrow 38-mile strait that served Europe and Asia and northwest Turkey, to seize Constantinople and gain control of the strategic waterways linking the Black Sea in the east to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. Churchill believed the invasion would give the British a clear sea route to their ally Russia and knock the fading Ottoman Empire, the, quote, sick man of Europe, end quote, that had reluctantly joined the Central Powers in October 1914 out of the war, which would persuade one or all of the neutral states of Greece, Bulgaria, and Romania to join the Allies. The first step would be an attack on Gallipoli Peninsula on the northern side of the Dardanelles, an operation that Churchill, who now became the plan's chief advocate, knew would be risky. Quote, the price to be paid in taking Gallipoli would no doubt be heavy, end quote, he wrote. Quote, but there would be no more war with Turkey. A good army of 50,000 and sea power, that is the end of the Turkish menace, end quote. The British War Office, however, refused to send as many troops as he wished, but Churchill sent in the fleet anyway. The attack in Gallipoli began on the morning of February 19th, 1915, with long-range bombardment of the peninsula by British and French battleships. Despite initial success, the attack stalled as the weather grew worse and Allied minesweepers drew heavy fire. Under pressure from Churchill to continue the attack, the British naval commander in the region, Admiral Sackville-Carden, suffered a nervous collapse and was replaced by Vice Admiral John de Robeck. Days later, on the morning of March 18th, British and French battleships entered the straits and launched an attack. Again, the Allies had the upper hand in the initial hours until undetected mines sank 3 ships and severely damaged 3 others. With half of his fleet out of commission, de Robeck ordered a withdrawal. Churchill wanted his commander to press on, but de Robeck wanted to wait for army support forces, which were now being provided after all. As the fleet hesitated, it lost the advantage. So this is the one part here where basically it says that they lost the ships and Churchill wanted to push on, but the new officer, de Robeck, ordered a withdrawal, right? And this is the one part that Churchill was probably correct. To push on was the proper, to wait a month is going to be the incorrect answer. So, okay, let's just keep going then. In the wake of the failed naval attack, the Allies launched a major land invasion on Gallipoli on April 25th. The month-long delay allowed the Turks to rush reinforcements to the peninsula and boost their defenses. And the British, French, and members of the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, ANZAC, could make little progress from their beachheads. The turquoise waters of the Aegean Sea turned crimson as the stiff Turkish resistance struck down the waves of Allied forces that washed ashore. The Battle of Gallipoli became a slaughter and quickly morphed into a stalemate just as bloody, just as pointless as that on the Western Front. In the first month after storming the peninsula, the Allies lost 45,000 men. The ill-fated Gallipoli campaign lasted 9 months before the evacuation of the last Allied troops in January 1916. Each side sustained 250,000 casualties, with 46,000 Allied troops and 65,000 Turkish troops dead. Now, when we put this in perspective of the overall World War I, just to see how terrible it was, it's not really that terrible, because if you look at the total number of deaths in World War I, we're going to look at the Entente powers or the Allied powers having approximately 5.7 million dead, with the Central powers having 4 million dead. And so you're talking about 46,000 dead troops here. I mean, if you do the math on that, it's going to be a very small percentage of the overall troops. But that's not the point here. The point is that the operation was just an absolute failure. And now you have 46,000 dead people for just nothing and no hopes of advancement in the future. It's just an absolute disaster, you know? I'm not trying to say that he, you know, like it altered the war or anything. If he had succeeded, it could have altered the war. But I mean, just imagine 46,000 families whose children died on a wasted operation that just stopped. It's pretty terrible. Anyways, the invasion had been scuttled by incompetence and hesitancy by military commanders. But fairly or unfairly, Churchill was the scapegoat. Gallipoli disaster threw the government into crisis, and the Liberal Prime Minister was forced to bring opposition Conservatives into a coalition government. As part of their agreement to share power, the Conservatives wanted Churchill, a renegade politician who had bolted their party a decade earlier, out from the Admiralty. In May 1915, Churchill was demoted to an obscure cabinet post. So that's it on this subject. That's it, because we're going to go after this into how he's selling fake paintings and all this stuff he's doing until he gets snatched up by that the cabal of people who are going to pay him to do terrible things on behalf of Britain in World War II. But that's all just the content of another episode. I just want to confine this to this one story. It's an interesting piece of history. And I mean, pretty soon, maybe like a week from now, because I got a villain series later this week, but I'm to do the research for the entire Winston Churchill one now that I've got all the sub episodes done. Okay, so basically, what I got for you is on Thursday I'm going to do a villain episode on Martin Luther King Jr. Right, and I'll tell you in that video why I particularly want to do that one right now. So on Wednesday I'm doing another episode, and I don't know what it's called yet, but basically, we're going to talk about the overrepresentation of Jewish people in organizations like the ACLU, the NAACP, the SPLC, stuff like that, right? Because I need you to understand that information, because I'm going to reference it in the Martin Luther King Jr. episode. Anyways, that's what I got for you. Hope to see you on Wednesday.